Hey guys, so after a previous battle report against beast herds, I'm back with a Cult of Nab Dread Elf army, this time facing another opponent. So this Cult of Nab theme army is a cult army, which means that it's only allowed to take units from the Cult of Nab or unaligned units. And the upgrade that the advantage that you get in your list is that the Dread Legionnaires and the Corsairs and the Repeater Auxiliaries, they're automatically also Cult of Nab instead of just unaligned. So this gives them hatred, but they lose Killer Instinct through this. But then again, if you put a Cult Priest who's on foot in a unit, then you regain the Killer Instinct. So what happened, what changed with regards to the previous list? I think the most important changes are the Dread Knights got a little bit smaller, and I fitted in 2 units of Dark Acolytes instead of the Hunting Chariots, because I felt that in this list the Hunting Chariots don't really do that well, and the Dark Acolytes, they kind of can remove monsters in the same way as the Hunting Chariots can do. But that's it for my list. So let's look at the list of my opponent. So it's a Dwarven Holds list. It's just a list of stuff that he likes. So you have just a block of Greybeards in core, some marksmen for some shooting support, 2 blocks of 20 Seekers that are quite scary, a block of 15 Kingsguard that can, together with the King, also Vanguard, and then 2 Vengeance Seekers and 2 Dwarf Ballistas. So it looks like a very simple army on paper, and on the board it also is quite a simple army. So let's get into the deployment. So without further ado, let's get into the game. So we just decided to do a normal frontline clash without any secondary objective, just to keep it a bit simple. So you can see me, my opponent and me deploying. And yeah, I really wanted to have my Dread Legionnaires across the field from his Seekers and his Kingsguard. And during the deployment, he first put down his ranged unit, which I had expected. So I counter deployed with some units that I could still just easily move over to any place on the battlefield. And then he deployed 1 unit of Kingsguard. I was quite sure that there was going to be the King in there, and I think that the Executioners are a good matchup for that. Just to try and take on, or at least pick off some wounds from the King, because they have multiple wounds, 2 against this guy. And then he started putting down some Seekers. I thought the Blades of Nab were also good on that flank. And then what I should have done was to put the Dread Legionnaires all the way on the flank together with the Blades of Nab. But I didn't, and also I actually forgot about the fact that my opponent has Vanguard on the Seeker blocks, and also the King apparently gives the unit of Kingsguard Vanguard. So I was a little bit oblivious to this, and I believe at this point it had been mentioned. So with the rest of my deployment I could still react to this. I figured that a unit of Blades of Nab and a unit of Corsairs could be able to deal with 1 block of Seekers, so that my Legionnaire unit could go in the center, and then I would still have the choice of whether I would want to go to the left or the right. And then this is the deployment that we end up with, and I would say that I made a mistake here by not putting the Dread Legionnaires all the way also on the flank in the space where the Dread Knights are currently. Because my opponent, he cannot get away anymore with his Seekers and his Kingsguard from this place, and I really want to get the matchup between the Dread Legionnaires and these Seekers. But we will see what's going to happen with the Vanguard of my opponent. So he Vanguards up quite far. He's going to have the first turn. So with the first turn, he moves up even further, and he just shoves them basically into my face. Yeah, so the Dread Legionnaires should definitely have been on the top left of the field. Because what basically is quite likely to happen now is that he's just gonna go through my small numbers of elves, mostly based on the Slayer's "You're coming with me" rule. That means that every time you kill a Slayer, it still gets to strike once back at strength 5. And for elves, this is just completely insane. You just have a 50% chance that you die, basically. Unless you have the cavalry elves, but then still, for every 4 Slayers you kill, you lose a knight, which is costly. It's really costly, because then still the Slayers get to attack, and yeah, and I don't have to worry about them breaking or anything. And I don't have any ranged output on the flank, so I'm really gonna have to deal with these Slayers in combat, which is not the way you want to deal with them, ideally. Yeah, so my opponent was arguing that even though I would be able to kill off the Slayers, I would still get the points for them. But yeah, just getting a 1-to-1 trade with the Slayers under any condition is not really the best. So what you see me do is that I actually managed to charge the Dread Judges into the King's Guard. As I measured it out, and there was just barely enough, there was sufficient distance between his King's Guard unit and my Dark Acolytes to fit my unit. So I actually managed to charge them instead of the Vengeance Seekers, or the Seekers, normal Seekers, for which I was very happy because I could corner to corner get a champion and a normal Dread Judge in contact with this King. So with the supporting attacks, that's going to be 5 attacks with 4+2 hit, hatred, strength 6, lethal strike, multiple wounds 2. And this king, he has 6 wounds on the throne, so you have a long way to go, but just nipping off some wounds is at least going to help. So yeah, for the rest on the right flank, I just tried to mitigate the damage that my opponent can do, or at least the time space that my opponent is going to be able to do it in. And probably I should have marched up with my Dread Legionnaires to, yeah, like 8 inches more down and just turning inwards towards the flank of the King's Guard and the Slayers, so that I would put pressure on my opponent there on the flank. Because right now the reasoning I had was that I didn't really want to get a lot of shots of my opponent in, but I have a unit of 40 bodies. So with him having a total of 24 shots that hit on 4+, wound on 3+, that should be like 8 kills. It does hurt, it does obviously hurt, but had I gone all out with both the Dread Judges and the Knights and the Dark Acolytes on the left, and also the Dread Legionnaires in the center, then my opponent would have had to choose. And also the crossbows, they don't hit on 4+, I believe, but on 5+, because they're not accurate. So yeah, I should just have taken the damage there and put pressure on my opponent. But anyway, yeah, this is already the second mistake in the game, because they should have been up in the top right corner, as I already knew the deployment of my opponent anyway. Yeah, so that's that. In Magic, yeah, just every single turn I get about 2 spells off, and the variation is basically either minus offensive, defensive, and agility on my opponent's unit, some random movement here and there, and yeah, I also cast this turn Raven's Wing on the Knights to move them up a little bit further away from the Slayers, so that the overrun would be in 11 if he is going to charge the Dark Acolytes. And then with the Ravens, or with the Evil Eye, I gave it twice to the Harpies to make sure that the next turn they could be charging into the Ballista. So in combat, combat sees me removing 11 of the Slayers, I believe, or the Seekers, in the right unit with the Blades van Naap. And the executioners, they do manage to inflict 4 wounds on the king. So with the 5 attacks, forced to hit with reroll to hit, and 3s to wound with lethal strike. That's not too bad. My opponent, I believe, in the end I did only 2 wounds, which is low. But then my opponent failed his armor saves and his ward saves. So that evened it out quite nicely. And having 4 wounds on this king right in my first turn is, I would say it's really good. Yeah. Yeah, and then I was contemplating even to charge in the chariot next turn to try and knock off the king. But yeah, you're definitely gonna lose the chariot, and I figured it out. I also needed it to clear up some more of the seekers. My opponent's turn sees him charging with the seekers onto the next line of bodies. So by now, his combined 3 units have removed a unit of Dread Judges and Blades of Nap, and they're just going to town on my flank. And in the middle, not a lot happens really, because his shooting is mostly out of range, or has to move, and then I believe he knocks off 2 Dread Legionnaires. But one of the ballistas actually in the first turn managed to shoot 3 wounds onto the Raptor Chariot, and now the ballistas finish off the Raptor Chariot, which was also kind of lucky for my opponent, I think. But well, you live with the hand that you get dealt, I think. Yeah, so combat, my opponent manages to wipe the Corsairs. So the Corsairs only managed to do a couple of wounds, like 3 or 4 wounds. And my opponent does manage to do some wounds back, and then with the attacks of the Seekers themselves, he kills off even more, and I don't manage to break test with the remaining 3 or 4 guys. And he runs me down, and the Seekers against the Dark Acolytes, I only managed to do 2 wounds on these guys. Even though I have 8 attacks with poison, I hit them on 3+, and I wound them on a 4+ with a reroll of the ones. So I had expected a couple more wounds there. And then he does manage to roll his 12 for the overrun, so that was quite a lucky one. Luckily I do have a counter charge with the chariot setup, but this unit has a -1 to wound, so the Seekers have a -1 to wound for me on them. And then I decide that, well, this is a time for me to go all out on the flank, to try and push through, just clean up his part of the army over there, and then with the Dread Legionnaires go back to the Seekers and the King's Guard to try and mop that up. Because I believe in a 1-to-1 battle, I'm just going to remove a lot of his bodies in a single turn, and then as long as he doesn't combo charge me, I'm gonna be able to just move through his units one by one. Yeah, so we have some more magic. I actually cast the random movement on to the King's Guard now, and I give him twice the Evil Eye, so he has 2d6 -2 movement, compared to his normal charge range of 3 inches plus 2d6. So for dwarves it actually doesn't make too much of a difference. But still, the chariot is at, I believe it was at 10 inches, so he needed a 12 to get in there. And then we see combat. So the unit that went into the crossbowmen was the Dark Acolytes, and the Dark Acolytes, they completely fluff, and in return they receive 2 or 3 wounds, and then they bounce off the unit of crossbowmen, which was really a pain. And the Dread Knights on the Vengeance Seeker, I believe they did manage to do like 2 wounds, and then my opponent rolled 2 ward saves on 6s, and then yeah, I'm just being held up with this Vengeance Seeker. He already killed 2 of my knights. So yeah, that's great. That's just great. Like, I have these you can see a template on the hill. That's still the Dread Judges over there, just to indicate where they are. Like, they're not behind the hill, they're just on top of the hill. So for next turn I do have a charge into the crossbowmen ready. but I have already just now invested 600, 500 points of combat dedicated troops onto getting these dwarves off the table, and all I've managed is to just put 1 wound on a Vengeance Seeker and kill off 2 crossbowmen. So yeah, that's how sturdy dwarves are. Yeah. Anyway. So then we go continue on top. So my opponent with his Seekers takes a bit of a beating from the Chariot and the Dread Knights. So the Chariot, the impact hits, he did 7 impact hits, so that was good. But then I rolled a lot of 3s to wound, and normally that would have been great, but my opponent had the -1 to wound on the unit, so I only did like 2 or 3 wounds. And at this point this is the point where I thought like, oh yeah, that's not gonna cut it. My opponent's gonna have Seekers left. And yeah, this turn I prevented him from being able to charge in with the King's Guard, but next turn I'm not gonna be able to mop up the Seekers as I had hoped. And that is a problem because then the next turn, over the turns my opponent will outgrind my Knights for sure. I'm in the flank with my Chariot, so he might still survive. But this means basically that my Chariot is going to die there as well, because I'm just not going through there fast enough. Yeah, and so far, what you saw is that my opponent used his Banner of the Relentless Company that I totally forgot about. So he just marches happily past my Dread Legionnaires. So yeah, that wasn't really a good solution for me. Maybe I should have cast the random movement on my own guys for 3d6 random movement to prevent this from happening. But then I wouldn't have been able to cast the random movement on my opponent's unit. And the funny thing about this random movement spell is that in this scenario I might as well have cast it on my own unit, because I was quite sure to lose the Chariot, so I probably shouldn't have even charged in there. Even though my opponent still had a ballista that was threatening the Chariot. But if I had casted on my own unit to give myself 3d6 plus 2 random movement, then I also wouldn't suffer from the dangerous terrain, and my opponent wouldn't have been able to give a charge reaction. So I could have next turn charged into the either the unit with the BSB, because with the random movement I would have been able to just catch him in the flank right now, so he wouldn't have been able to get away, or I would have been able to charge into the marksman, which would have been the way better play. So Witchcraft is certainly a very interesting lore to play, and I think also this army setup lends itself quite well for the lore. But I do find that actually I'm just missing like this 1 or 2 spells that are a little bit more useful. Even though Witchcraft, yeah, it is a very potent lore to have on a Wizard Master. So I certainly wouldn't want to go for a Wizard Adept on Witchcraft, because I think you do need the Twisted Effigy to make sure that the gunline matchup is way better than it otherwise would be. And the random movement, I believe Twisted Effigy is the one that you can take with the Wizard Adept, and the random movement not. But if you're up against the gun line, then you really also want to profit from this random movement spell. Yeah, and then the alternative in a Guild of Nab army would be to either add another mage, which could be okay with an alchemy mage, probably, to get some extra armor in there, because that would be the crucial spell, or to just upgrade one of the Dark Acolyte units to have a champion. And then you would get either the Hereditary or the Eyes on Fire, which could be a nice addition, or Altered Sight. And Altered Sight could even decrease the performance of your opponent's gun line further. So that might still be an idea for this army to just not take the magical heirloom on the caster, but instead take a Dark Acolyte champion. Yeah, so I'll just have to look at that. Otherwise, regarding the list, I think that the Dread Knights, they didn't really perform too well this battle. Well, normally you shouldn't really base your opinion on one single battle. But if you compare them against the Dread Judges, then I think that the Dread Judges are, in 9 out of 10 cases, just a better pick. Because if you have a monster charging in, it's going to be having AP 3 or more, most likely. So then it doesn't really matter whether you have the Knights or the Dread Judges. The Dread Judges can be stomped, that's true. But by the time that someone charges in, the Dread Judges still have at Agility 5, 1 at Strength 6 attack, each with Hatred, whilst the Dread Knights do not have this. So the Dread Knights are actually only better on the charge, I would say. And even then, the Dread Judges, they have just more attacks at Strength 6. So I really like these Dread Judge units with a champion at 235 points or so. They really strike hard. So yeah, we are kind of cleaning up my army in the top right. So all I have left is like 2 Dread Judges and my Wizard Master. A single Harpy that managed to survive after the smackdown between the Harpies and the Ballista, and my block of Dread Legionnaires. Whilst my opponent has his Anvil of Power that's situated behind the impassable terrain. So my unit is kind of too wide to get in there and do something about it. So I try to still get to my opponent's army here in the corner. And the Wizard Master, together with the Dread Judges, they finally managed to clean up these crossbowmen. And my opponent still has his, as I say, the Anvil, a Vengeance Seeker that I just charged into with my Dread Legionnaires. His King, for which I don't get any points because he's still at 2 hit points out of the 6. His BSB, his Greybeards, his Kingsguard, and actually I only get half points for one of the Seeker units, I believe. So in the end, these Seekers units, they mopped up like 1200 points of my army just by moving forward and hacking through. And yeah, so yeah, after I had dropped the Blades of Nab and the Dread Judges on that flank, ideally I should just have put the Dread Legionnaires with the characters on that flank and try to make sure that my opponent only gets 1 unit in there at a single time, because I can then get the Hatred bonus against each unit again and again, and then I might be able to just kill him, because if he's gonna have a full unit of Seekers in that unit, I'm gonna have 28 attacks on him that strike first, that hit him on a 3+ with Hatred, that wound him on a 4+ with reroll once to wound, so that's gonna be like 14 wounds, more or less, a little bit more maybe. And then the Prince and the Cult Priest, they also still strike. So I'm either gonna fully or nearly fully mutilate his Seeker unit with one of these charges. So if they have been weakened by the Blaze of Nab or the Corsairs or anything, to just take off a couple of wounds, I can just remove one of these units per round. And then if he's gonna strike back with the You're Coming With Me rule, imagine that he has like 16 Seekers left. It's gonna be 8 hits more or less, and it's gonna be like 7 or 6 wounds. So that would still be okay. So as you might have noticed, I didn't really comment on what was going on in the battle at the final stages of the battle anymore. I'll just very quickly go over it. So my opponent just hunkers up in the corner. I still try to get there with my big block. So I did cast the random movement spell on myself, and I also managed to buff myself with a 2+ on my movement. And then for the random movement overrun, after killing the Vengeance Seeker, I got a 15 on the dice, which became 17 inches. I had a last turn to try to get to him, but he was able to move away. And that is how the game ended. So my opponent still was able to hold more points than I was. So it ended in a 8-12 loss for me. But as I said, had I played it right, I probably would have been able to pull a win out of this one. So the list, yeah, I am quite happy with the list. The only thing I'm not happy about is the Dread Knights. So I think I'm gonna try to run the list with 4 units of Dread Judges, and also a champion on the Dark Acolytes, so that I have effectively 3 spells that work against the gun line. And yeah, the Dread Judges, their main weakness would be just gun line, basically. But then again, the Dread Knights also suffer from the same issues, where if you put a unit of 10 Dread Judges down, I believe it's kind of equal cost to 5 Dread Knights. Maybe the Dread Knights are a little bit more expensive, but if you put a champion in Dread Judges, it probably evens out. So you either have 10 wounds with a resilience 3 5+ armor, or 5 wounds with resilience 4 2+ armor. So yeah, with some variation in your list, you're gonna have the advantage of being more varied. Obviously, that really makes sense. But if your opponent has some specific type of shooting, then variation is probably good. If your opponent has varied type of shooting, then just focusing on one aspect is going to be good. And it kind of depends on what I want the list to be. If I want to be able to rush into a gun line, it's going to be a coin flip either way, I think, whether I'll make it or not. And the Dread Knights are not necessarily going to make a big difference in this, because anyway not gonna be able to shove my units forward turn 1 and take a charge anywhere in my army. So I'm gonna anyway take 2 turns to get to my opponent's to threaten my opponent's deployment, basically. Yeah, so I think the Dread Judges are the better pick in this case, probably, together with the Mage that can also still select some spells. So that's what the new update on the list is going to be, I think. And then, yeah, quite probably the next game will also be Dread Elves. So thank you for watching, and see you the next time.